Thank you, Alistair. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along. So I'll spend about 25 minutes talking about the landscape as we see it. But as I talk about the landscape, I'll also try and bring out the importance of focus on business value, but on data engineering, on your data and using your data with the capabilities that are available today. All time, really, or from very near the beginning of Thorogood, our approach has been to work with customers and prospective customers to understand their business goals hand in hand with the technical possibilities. And that's pretty important to do. If you identify the solution space properly, you're set up for success. If you underestimate what technology can do, then you're really leaving others to get ahead of you in terms of competitive advantage. But if you overestimate what technology can do, you're setting yourself up for potentially embarrassing, perhaps expensive project failure. So we work with customers, really understand business goals, understand technical possibilities, and from that identify the opportunities. What's changing is that AI, in all of its forms, is enriching the technical possibilities. Of course, in the last 2.5 years, it's now 2.5 years ago that ChatGPT was launched, and with that launch came a lot of attention, a lot of hype around generative AI. But when we're thinking about AI, we're thinking about, yes, generative AI, but in the context of AI more broadly. And in its broadest sense, the application of science, data science, and data engineering to develop intelligent machines. So within that broad umbrella, machine learning is very important. Within machine learning, deep learning is very important and has been really about harnessing very, very large neural networks to do cognitive tasks, the kind of things that a few years ago, many of us would have thought were particularly human attributes, but now are done pretty well by machines, in fact, very well by machines. And within deep learning, the emergence of generative AI models, which are really about generating outputs that are indistinguishable from human outputs. So we think it's sensible to think about all aspects of AI, but to think about all aspects of AI in conjunction with your data and the data that's uniquely available to you, and in the context of your business goals. I'm going to go back in time 5.5 years, so to a time 3 years before ChatGPT, and therefore before the generative AI hype, and to a time when we hadn't even heard of COVID, so quite a long time ago. One of these events, it's very similar to this event, but the thing that was in the air of our business and our customers that we were dealing with at the time was digital transformation. Everything was about digital transformation, getting to the cloud. And I'll take the slide this is exactly as it was back at the time. It's an imperative in the context of digital transformation. It's an imperative, but. And the but that we were aware of, at board level, the discourse, the instructions coming from top level was very much, move and move fast, but do it and do more for less. That this opportunity to move to the cloud should take cost out of things. So do a lot for a little, invest in AI, ML, chatbots, the rest is commoditized. Now remember, this is 5.5 years ago. So on the ground, what we were encountering was that people were really wondering, really struggling with how to make it happen. How do you get to the cloud? What is it that we need to understand about cloud adoption that is the key to its success rather than on-prem development and delivery? And all of the changes in working practices that go with taking full advantage of cloud development. Far from everything being commoditized, it was a big enough struggle to make that transformation, let alone embrace AI, ML. So I think that's kind of an interesting backdrop because there's a gap there. That gap at the time was not necessarily being helped by the vendors or by the strategy consultants. In fact, it's the playbook of the big technology vendors to push adoption by giving everybody the impression that they're behind. Oh, they're behind, other people are doing wonderful things, and they're going to be disrupted if they don't catch up. So there's this fear of being behind, fear of being disrupted, even at stages where not many other people are doing very much at all. So it's pretty hard with that kind of vendor backdrop and the strategy consultant backdrop to actually benchmark where you really are. What's the parallel? Well, since, I suppose, November 2022, when ChatGPT came out, the parallel is enormous pressure to do things and to embrace a new technology. But this time, the technology literally has hundreds of billions of dollars being pumped into it by the big vendors, without yet the revenue streams being very clear. So there's a lot of pressure from those that are making the big investments to get people to do things. We think it's pretty important to understand that commercial setup and that commercial pressure, so that when you're thinking about what you want to do and what the possibilities are, you've got your commercial interests in mind, not being pushed by the commercial interests of others that have a distinctly different aspect to them. Quite often, over many years, when we're thinking about things internally at Thorogood or when we're thinking with customers, we'll use slides to try and capture the context. This is a context chart from the Grove Consultants that is a favorite. In broad terms, it addresses on this side the outside trends, over the other side the internal trends that might be acting on a company to cause it to think in particular ways. In between those things, there's the political climate and the economic climate. And within all of that, there's technology factors that are helping in some way to address customer needs and to help us deal with uncertainties. So that's the general structure of the chart. Of course, when we're coming at things, our particular focus is on helping companies make best use of data, fullest use of data for competitive advantage, to take cost out of things, to push the top line, etc. So we're interested in helping customers to have the appropriate modern data platform, to be able to understand where and how to use machine learning or AI or generative AI. And this morning we'll talk about agentic AI. My colleague Scott will do that in a few minutes. But all of that really is part of a broad sweep of digital transformation. But of course, the boardroom topics aren't just about the things that Thorogood is doing. A big one at the moment: tariffs, trade, inflation, or the potential inflationary impacts of what's happening in tariffs and trade, and the potential interest rate impacts. So there's something that is very current. Interestingly, in the last 2 weeks, I guess, JP Morgan have observed, remarked that even though there's so much going on with tariffs, the dominant conversation in corporate quarterly briefings is still AI. So AI is pretty important. Tariffs are obviously very important, but all of this really plays into a broader context of some now very well established and important sweeps of globalization, of transformation to a sustainable economy. So those sweeps we think are likely to be changed by current political change, but they won't be knocked off. Or, the sweeps will continue. There'll be adjustments to the pace and direction. The political landscape, well, it's very changed. At the beginning of 2024, there was a lot of attention drawn to the fact that it would be a year in which more democracies went to the polls than in any other single year. And that happened, and by and large, the outcome of that was that incumbents lost, really. That there was a change in many, many countries, not everywhere by any means, but in a lot of places. So there's a lot of change. Quite often the change was not just a minor change, but from one pole to another. In fact, we just had a Polish election and it did go from one pole to another. But I think Donald Tusk would probably approve of the pun. So sometimes from those swings from pole to pole, it feels or seems chaotic. It's presented in many media aspects as chaotic. But we've seen swings before. We've seen swings caused by nature. COVID feels chaotic, but we get through it. Or Brexit, political choice, feels chaotic, but we get to the other side of it. Or financial meltdown, global financial meltdown, we get beyond it. So things feel chaotic when we're living through it. The economic climate, the world's economies and markets, they're volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Again, feels like a particular moment of that, but it's very often feeling very volatile, complex, ambiguous, and uncertain. And in the bottom corner there, tariffs, geopolitical risks, exchange rates, interest rates, inflation, impact of AI. There feels like there's so much uncertainty, but it's important that we understand what we can't control and what we can control, and that we use data, decision science to keep people fact-based, making decisions on the basis of what is happening and what is likely to happen, not on the basis of fear of what might happen or misinformation that's being put out there. So it's a time to use data very, very thoroughly, properly. The landscape in previous ones of these, we've looked at the landscape through 6 boxes, and we'll carry on doing that today. Some of the logos in the boxes are slightly changed. But fundamentally, the 6 boxes will go from silicon chip manufacturers or designers all the way to the most important part of the value chain, really, which is people in this room or the kinds of organizations that people in this room represent. In between, we'll talk about cloud service providers, through whom we're able to access the various facilities that are available to us. The foundation model developers who are creating these intelligent models. The AI development tools developers that are probably much less well known to most people, but are very important, and making it possible to work and to identify things in a as a developer, in a fast-moving environment. We can find the right things and we can stitch them together. Those are the 6 boxes. Enterprise organizations. Well, none of the people making investments in other parts of the chain will get payback unless there's real benefit. And that benefit has to be ultimately felt by companies and individuals as consumers in the economy. When we're approaching things, I've said already, we tend to start from business goals and an appropriate understanding of the technology that might help with those business goals. When we've identified the particular solution space with the customer, we'll work in a framework that we've shared before many times, but which we think of as both ends into the middle. We'll be working from the business use case, where are we going to get business advantage, and who is going to do that, and how are they going to do that? And at the other end, what are the data sources that might help achieve the business use case? How are we going to move into the middle and combine, align, transform, refine data so that it can be accessed in the way that's going to make a difference to people taking decisions? So that both ends into the middle is an important framework for us. All parts of it are susceptible to the changes in AI making a big difference. So if we think about the ways we can interact at the user interface, we can chat with data, we can speak to systems and have systems speak back to us if we choose to. We can do all sorts of things that are kind of new possibilities to interact with data. At the gathering of data end of things, we can think of virtually anything as data now. Virtually anything. You'll see more examples of that as we go through the morning. But unstructured data, things that used to be quite hard to deal with, we can deal with pretty straightforwardly now. And by the time we get to the options to align things and use things, that's enriched very much by the generative AI revolution that's going on. So, landscape, foundation model developers. So OpenAI, people are very, I think, aware of OpenAI because of their partnership with Microsoft, their involvement with ChatGPT, but also because they frequently hit the news because of kind of politics at the top of OpenAI, tensions in the relationship with Microsoft, tensions in various aspects of what they're trying to do, from their fundamental origins of being not for profit to trying to move to a position where they're more free to pursue a profit motive. Meta, creator of the Llama models, but I mean, we probably think of Meta as the parent of Facebook and WhatsApp and all of those other things, but pretty important in this space for creating the Llama models, which are open source. Anthropic, pretty important. You'll see aspects of Anthropic today, but yeah, available through Amazon Bedrock, available through every platform actually, but embedded in some platforms more than others. Mistral AI, really developing some very powerful, intelligent reasoning models. Also in partnership with Microsoft. Google, very, very active in this space, have been since before ChatGPT and are quietly asserting their capabilities in search and in all sorts of other ways. Somebody who has been a very respected sort of analyst and star investor in Silicon Valley for a long, long time is this person, Mary Meeker. She'd put out reports on internet trends that were very, very closely watched in Silicon Valley. She's just very recently done a very big report on AI, but one of the top line things that she calls out is that the people, apart from being an analyst, I say she's a star investor. She was an early investor in Meta, an early investor in Spotify. Thank goodness. What would we do without Spotify? An early investor in Airbnb. So she's not just an analyst, she's on it in many ways. But her big call out, picked up in the FT last weekend, competition from groups including China's DeepSeek suggests big AI models will be commoditized. So that's kind of frightening if you're one of these players. The current price tag to develop one of these new models is $100 million. So you're spending a lot of money to develop models, but you're being caught very quickly by one another. The DeepSeek shock that came along in 20th of January or something this year, a company in China able to do it seemingly as well but cheaper because even though deprived of some of the technologies available for the US companies, almost because of that deprivation, doing their engineering more tightly, better in some ways, and taking the cost down. Probably quite difficult to see. I'll zoom in a minute, but this analysis. A colleague just reminded me earlier, actually, of where it's from, but it's something astonishingly simple, like advancedanalysis.ai or something. But they grade models, these foundation models, these large language models, according to their intelligence, their speed, their price. Intelligence, the higher the bar, the better. Speed, the higher the bar, the better. It's being measured in output tokens per second. You can cheat it a little bit. So I think the one that's way ahead there puts its tokens out as it's going more quickly than some of the others. So it's not the strictest measure anyway. Price is price per million tokens in dollars, US dollars, price per million per million tokens going into the model. And in that case, lower prices is better. So all other things being equal, you'd just go for the lowest price model, but not all things are equal, and not all things are static. So they're changing constantly as people push out new models, and they'll push out families of models. They'll develop a big model, but they'll develop smaller variants that can be run quicker and more cheaply. So this is the intelligence ranking. So there is some, gradient there. But if we take, for example, DeepSeek R1, rated at 60, the best that you could get on this ranking, 70. Next to it, another reasoning model, Gemini 2.5 Flash from Google, rated at 60. So yes, you could have something that is a bit better than that. You could have something that's a bit worse than that. But there's a constant competition to win on that score. In terms of, let's go to the price end of it. So the two models, DeepSeek R1 priced at $1 per million input tokens. Oh, look, and Gemini 2.5 Flash also priced at $1. You could pay a lot more. We'll be seeing some of the Claude or some of the Anthropic models, Claude 3.7 Sonnet thinking model here, $6 per million tokens going in. So there's a big variation in cost of running these models. Speed, well, there's variation in speed as well. DeepSeek R1, very low on the speed thing. So, okay, it's not costing you very much. It's pretty intelligent, but it's also slow compared to some other things. Google's Gemini 2.5 Flash reasoning, very fast on this measurement. So there's lots of options, and those options are changing all of the time. Cloud service providers, so AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, we're all familiar with those. They are collectively hyperscalers and are committing to even greater investment in 2025. So even greater investment, despite all of the economic news and the market news and uncertainties about tariffs. As they've completed their most recent quarterly reporting cycles, they're just committing more, committing as confidently as ever to the spending that they're doing. Now here on the chart, I've added in Meta, or the chart has the three of them plus Meta. Meta isn't making their platform available in the same way, but Meta is pouring in investment. If we exclude Meta for a moment, you get to something like 225 billion being spent in 2025. So recently recommitted to. They're not holding back because of economic doubts. And put Meta on top of it, you get to about 320 billion being spent this year by those four players on capital expenditure to build out AI infrastructure. So very big investment. The thing to bear in mind with that, Meta would say it's getting payback through its advertising placement efficiency. Google, likewise, to some degree. But in terms of flows from companies like ours and consumers like us paying for it, the revenue streams are tiny compared to the investment streams at this point. So these people making these investments need to somehow work out how they're going to get the money back on those investments. One other point, I suppose, if you go to the top six, the increase in expenditure in 2025 versus the year before, about 63%. At that point, you're bringing in Apple, another big spender. Next, the chip manufacturers. So, first of all, NVIDIA is widely recognized as the leading chip maker when it comes to AI. Second thing, it doesn't make chips. The fabrication of the chips is done by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. And where Google, and indeed these days Amazon, Microsoft, are trying to get into the chip business as well, they're using TSMC for fabrication too. Intel tries to develop its own chips, but is struggling in the fabrication area. It can't match the technology at the moment that TSMC applies on behalf of NVIDIA. But NVIDIA, a very powerful grip on the market. So this assessment of its market share, over 90% market share. This is NVIDIA's share of the data center market, so the build out of these AI data centers. And the source, the Generative AI Market Report 2025 to 2030 by IoT Analytics. So NVIDIA's position is strong, not just because of its chips, but because it has networking technology to link those chips together into super clusters. But also it has the software that happens to be the software of choice for the model developers to develop their models when they're training their AI systems. And in many cases, people are training using NVIDIA GPUs, GPU chips, and they're running inference workloads, i.e. when we're putting stuff through, the inference workloads are being run on GPUs as well. In the case of Google, they have their own TPU chips, which are pretty efficient, Google says, in terms of running the workloads, not so much the training, but running the workloads. But NVIDIA, because of its position, is a big beneficiary of these capital expenditures so far. And that list of bars is from their published quarterly results, just marching up from November 2022 going into 2023. This is where ChatGPT was launched. Shortly after that, some supply difficulties, but then this chip market just takes off. And in the latest quarter, just under 40 billion of sales into that one sector by NVIDIA. Consequence for NVIDIA, it's very profitable. Obviously, its income's growing, and it's very profitable, and it's now valued at about, as of yesterday, market capitalization about $3.4 trillion. So one of the world's most valuable companies. It's benefiting. So at the moment, some people are pouring in investment, not knowing where the revenues are coming from. NVIDIA knows where the revenues are coming from. Enterprise analytics platforms, AI development tools, Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, we sort of all know, I think, what they are. In terms of Databricks and Snowflake, different, but equivalent in some senses. They're giving us a way of building applications on top of the cloud platforms, regardless of which cloud platform. If we want to be somewhat insulated from our underlying cloud platform choice, or if we find ourselves having to bridge different cloud platforms, Databricks, Snowflake are giving us the abilities to do that. So we can build a layer higher. And that's very important for keeping options open. And in any of these platforms, it's not quite true to say you can get any of the foundation models through any platform, but you pretty much can these days. But you will pay different prices according to which platform you're accessing through. And sometimes those pricing differences are quite surprisingly extreme. So it pays to have optionality to make sure that you're not beholden to one vendor and you're not then caused to pay prices that you would otherwise not want to pay. In terms of the AI development tools, companies like Hugging Face are helping us see what's available as developers at any point in time to understand what we might want to look at and what we might want to integrate into our solutions. The standards are getting better, and the standards are getting better in a way that enables us to pick up anybody's model and integrate it into a solution. So it's helping us keep optionality high, be independent of, it's helping us not be captive to a particular vendor. I won't say more other than to quote somebody, David Kahn, who's a very focused analyst at Sequoia Capital in this market. He's been really close tracking the investment that's going in from some of the big investors, but also the revenues and the gap between the investment and revenues, and interested in what will need to happen to close that gap. But he's saying in this quote, the AI infrastructure build out is happening, and it certainly is very quickly. Infrastructure is not the problem anymore. Many foundation models are being developed. That's not the problem anymore. And the tooling in AI is pretty good today. Now, he wrote that, I think, in September 2023, and we thought it was true then, and it's certainly true. It's just marching on very, very quickly. So the tooling is very good. And his question back then, so what are you going to do to use all of this infrastructure? And hopefully this morning's sessions will help you get a sense of that. Now, Thorogood's approach through all of this, again, I hope the sessions later in the morning will give you a clearer view of it. But as with all things we do, we think joined up thinking is pretty important end to end, not to segment things into a data scientist's job and a data engineer's job, but end to end, joined up thinking, focused on business goals. Consider data and AI together. So these models are trained on a lot of data. We're all sort of aware of that. But what really that training does is to imbue into the models some capabilities. And it's when we apply those capabilities to your specific data that it becomes powerful. And particularly amongst your specific data, the data that you uniquely have that other people don't have is the source of competitive advantage. Data and AI together. With that, attach appropriate value to data engineering. And data engineering really is best done, is only doable in the context of a modern data platform. So attach appropriate importance to the data platform and to the data engineering skill that you'll need. Understand the value chain and the technical possibilities, but understand the value chain not just for the technical possibilities, not just to understand where the new things are coming from, the new capabilities are coming from, but to understand the commercial implications too, to make sure that you understand what you're locking into and whether you need to lock into. You can keep your options open much more easily than you might think. There is no winner in the space. It's not all sewn up by Microsoft and OpenAI. It's wide open. So keep your options open. And that's the final point, really. Keep optionality front of mind. Now, one last thing before I hand over to Scott to talk about agentic AI. Somebody called Andrew Ng. Why am I citing this? I'm citing it because he makes a point about data engineering, but I'm also citing it because I trust his view. We at Thorogood trust his view. He's a very accomplished academic. He's also a very accomplished business person in this space. When I say accomplished academic, adjunct professor at Stanford University, founder of Coursera or co-founder of Coursera, but also in real world business, one of the co-founders of Google Brain, which was the area from which Google's AI capabilities have emerged. Very successful in China in establishing AI platforms. So he's accomplished as an academic, accomplished as a player in this space. But his third point here, we'll hear lots about agentic as we go through the morning, but his third point, data engineering's importance is rising, particularly on management of unstructured data, text, images, and we'd say ... and everything, really.